Yes, this is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. It's Friday, the end of the week. I know they all kind of blur together, but it is the end, at least of this week. So, I guess there's that. We survived another week, just barely though. All right, so I'm in an interesting mood, and we've got an interesting show as usual. So I'm going to lay into some celebrities today. So, celebrities bother me, especially ones that are stupid. So, we are going to talk about, of course, Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, the TV doctors are here and they are giving terrible advice. So, we're going to talk about that. We are also going to talk about Ellen, another celebrity. There seems to be a little bit of a labor dispute going on with Ellen's workers. So, look, as we talk about issues dealing with the working class and regular working people, this is important. So, we'll talk about this. We'll talk about why Ellen is garbage. And then we have, of course, a town hall. Where Joe Biden was definitely not at his best. And we're going to talk about how Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, is already using it to their advantage. Pretty sure I don't have the coronas, but I do have a little bit of a cough just happening now. So, all right. So anyway, we got those stories. We got Bernie Sanders finally addressing the Tara Reade allegations. What does he have to say? And then we've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about what Biden can do to maybe get the support of the left. And so if you agree with that, then that's look. It may be a controversial story. You may agree with her. You may not agree with her. But definitely there's a lot of nuance in what she's saying. So definitely something interesting to talk about and to consider. All right, so that's the rundown. That's what we're going to talk about today. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. So we are, of course, in the middle of coronavirus, which is, hurting ad revenue and things like that for the show. And it's not just hurting us, it's hurting everybody. And then add on to what we were doing before, going through the fact that we are not an authoritative source on YouTube, and therefore our views are being artificially suppressed. So very important to share. That's why, of course, I want to do a patron drive. I want to get us to at least 400 patrons, maybe by the end of the month. I mean, we're at 372 right now. So if you can, sign up patreon.com/TYTNation. If you can't, there's other ways that you can help the show, becoming a channel member or even donating to our PayPal, which one of you did as well, which is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you. And so a lot of ways to just try to keep us on the air during this difficult time. All right. I see that some of you in the chat actually received your stimulus check. Good. We have not. So I don't know when we will receive ours, but yeah. All right. Anyway, moving on. Let's dive into the first story. Let's go to Dr. Phil.
The fact of the matter is we have people dying. 45,000 people a year die from automobile accidents, 480,000 from cigarettes, 360,000 a year from swimming pools, but we don't shut the country down for that, but yet we're doing it for this.
That was Trash TV Dr. Phil, Dr. Phil McGraw, wondering why we're shutting down the country for this silly little thing like an incredibly virulent pandemic. Yeah. Now, he is following in the footsteps of Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz yesterday, and we'll play that video again for you later. Somehow, Dr. Phil sees what Dr. Oz said about sacrificing 2 to 3% of our population to get the kids back in school. And Dr. Phil takes a look at that and says, hold my beer. It's total trash. Total trash. Because you notice that the numbers that he is citing are wrong. So this was on Laura Ingram's show already. So you're on Fox News, strike one, right? Strike two, putting out these false numbers. So now before I get into that, he also added, there's a point in which people start having enough problems in lockdown that it actually create more destruction and actually more death across time than the actual virus itself. And then he starts rattling off things about, the poverty rate and all that. Look, you can have a point, but here's the thing. Reopening the economy is not the solution to that. The solution to that is government intervention. A lot of countries around the world are paying people close to 80 to 100% of their salaries while they are home during this lockdown. Others are giving a UBI and guaranteed health benefits. What we're doing here in America, we're giving people $600 extra in unemployment benefits and then a one-time $1,200 check. Whereas, again, you go back to some of the other countries, they're doing rent freezes, mortgage freezes. They're doing far more than we are here in America, and we're supposed to be the wealthiest country in the world. So, yeah. So you want to talk about poverty, right? Well, the government's actually supposed to do something about that. And instead, it looks like the plan is shove everybody back to work as soon as possible so that we can have a second and perhaps even a third wave of coronavirus deaths and infections. Awesome. So now getting to the numbers, right? So he said 360,000 people die a year from swimming pools. Really? Oh man, I didn't realize swimming pools were such a virulent killer. Oh my God. Somebody ought to ban those things. Oh, right. Those are actually not the numbers. In fact, data from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention show that from 2005 to 2014, an average of 3,536 people die a year from unintentional drowning. So now that's not just related to swimming pools. That's any type of drowning. Lakes, rivers, pools, all that stuff, hot tubs. Has anybody ever drowned in a hot tub? Probably, but I have no idea how you can do that. But anyway, it does happen, I'm sure. If you compare COVID-19 deaths to accidents of any kind, and, they're talking about car accidents as well. You know how many people died in a car accident? We don't shut down the country for that. Car accidents aren't contagious, moron. That's not how that works. I mean, it's a false equivalency. Even comparing it to smoking. Now, smoking does increase the risk of dying from respiratory diseases like COVID-19. That's absolutely true. And it makes it much higher, actually the risk much higher. But it's still not the same as contracting a highly contagious disease that we have no natural immunity to. But here's the thing. The entire reason that we are doing this lockdown, this economic shutdown, right? The stay-at-home orders is to flatten the curve so that our healthcare system is not completely overwhelmed and so that people don't die from not being able to access the health system. Right now, we're already stressed to the point of where our health system is starting to break down. We have shortages of ventilators. We have shortages of PPE. We have doctors and nurses that are getting sick from coronavirus and dying. We have grocery store workers that are getting sick and dying. I know they're not related to healthcare, but nonetheless, it's important to point out that there are people all over that are essential that are dying from COVID-19. So social distancing, the reason that we have it, and suspending the economy and the stay-at-home orders is to try to reduce transmission of the virus so that less people have to overwhelm the hospital system. You make it easier for, the system right now as it is to deal with the sick. Overloading them and killing more people from lack of ventilators and all that, right? And now it's also meant to buy us time until we can develop and test an effective treatment or vaccine. Urging the government to open up and people to go out, well, that's incredibly reckless. It is dangerous and it is stupid. And for people like Mr. Phil, by the way, Mr. Phil is not he's not a doctor of medicine. He's not an immunologist. He's not a virologist, right? He's a clinical psychologist. He's talking out his ass. And the reason he is talking out his ass is because he wants to make more money. Remember, this guy's sitting at home. He's not doing speaking gigs. Speaking gigs make him anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million every time he goes and speaks at like a corporate event, right? He's missing out on the money, man. So yeah, open it up, he says. I don't give a damn how many people die. My bottom line is way, way more important than people's actual lives. They're garbage, trash, Dr. Oz. Now, interestingly enough, Dr. Oz, he did sort of apologize a little bit. On Twitter, he said this: I realize my comments on risks around opening up schools have confused and upset people, which was never my intention. I misspoke. Oh, you misspoke, did you? Really? Well, let's just watch and see what you said verbatim.
Yeah, I tell you, schools are a very appetizing opportunity. I just saw a nice piece in The Lancet arguing that the opening of schools may only cost us 2 to 3% in terms of total mortality. And, that's any life is a life lost. But to get every child back into a school where they're safely being educated, being fed, and making the most out of their lives with a theoretical risk in the backside, it might be a trade-off some folks would consider.
Oh, it might be a trade-off. It's a trade-off. Hey, let's get the economy opened up. Kids back to school at only the small cost of an additional few thousand deaths. No, you didn't misspeak. You said cringe and you got your ass called out for it online. But understand, this is how the elites think about us. They want to sacrifice us to the markets because our lives to them are literally meaningless. They don't care. We're just another faceless consumer to them. And so if some of us die, well, I don't care about that. Oh, no, I'm not worried about that because someone else is going to take your place and consume and make me more money. No, we should actually be listening to real doctors and not fake TV doctors who sold out for a few bucks. This is who they really are. And you know what? There's that saying, and I forget who says it. But they said when somebody shows you who they really are, you should believe them. Well, this is who Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz really are. I guess I believe them. moving on. Let's go after these crappy celebrities. All right. Amid the coronavirus shutdown, Ellen DeGeneres has been continuing her daily syndicated talk show from the comfort of her mansion. And then, of course, complaining that it's like prison. Now, that, of course, negates the need to do the show for many of her staff, or for many of her staff to actually work on the show. Now, they're complaining that since this is the case, they're not getting guaranteed pay or hours. Now, that's a significant problem considering how the job market, 22 million people, are now out of work. Very difficult to find work now, especially when you have social distancing measures in place. So obviously, these people do need some help in order to take care of their families and to pay their bills. The $1,200 check from the government's not exactly going to cut it, especially if you work in LA, Hollywood, etc., right? So this is a big deal, right? It's very important. So now these staffers have spoken out, and they have talked to Variety. Now, according to one insider speaking to the magazine, these staffers, many of whom have been loyally working for her for years, have been shortchanged on their hours, have received pay cuts, and worst of all, nobody has been telling them about what's going to happen to them and their jobs and their pay. And not only that, but we're also replaced by a non-unionized tech company to help Ellen broadcast daily from her McMansion. Two sources at Ellen's show, speaking to Variety under conditions of anonymity because Ellen is reportedly very mean, especially to her staffers, say that higher-ups in production would occasionally answer phone calls but reveal little about their status. Crew members did actually hear from production executives last week, finally, after weeks of not having really any information about what is going to happen to them. And now, when they were contacted by executives, they were told to expect a 60% pay decrease. This is why the show has actually increased production. There are now more shows happening. So 60% pay decrease, right? The thing about Ellen is that she's actually worth a lot of money. I believe her contract is worth somewhere around 50 to 80 million or 50 to 90 million dollars a year. That's her contract. And she is worth anywhere from 330 to 450 million dollars, right? So she's worth quite a bit of money. So why is she cutting pay for her staff during a pandemic where millions of people are losing their jobs through no fault of their own? Now, the source also added that there are only four of the core crew members who are currently working on the remote version of Ellen. And even they have had their hours reduced because of less work, mainly because they hired someone else. But that's not even the most frustrating part for them, right? What they're complaining about mainly is the lack of communication. They didn't know any of this was coming. In fact, insiders speaking to the industry publication claimed that for over 2 weeks, from late March until April 9th, the crew were never told how much they were going to get paid or if they were going to get paid at all. And during the communication blackout, Ellen expanded her at-home, going from hosting 4 shows a week to 5, all of which were shot over a 2-day period in her home. Now, the show typically films 4 10-hour workdays per week, but the crew was told on April 10th that they should be expected to be paid for just 2 8-hour days a week. So a significant cut in hours and a significant cut in pay. And at the same time, they had hired Key Code Media produced technical elements of the show's new remote production, while their crew members with the same skill sets were not working. Now, again, I mentioned that there's no reason that they shouldn't be getting paid. Ellen is super wealthy. And here's the thing, when you compare what Ellen is doing to other people that are doing the same kind of work, right? Doing a talk show now from their homes, right? When you look at other people like Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel has been paying crew members out of his own pocket. As soon as this crisis began, he started dipping into his own fortune in order to pay his workers. And now, once they returned to air, ABC had started paying their full rates. Not only that, but you also have crew members on TNT's Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, HBO's Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and Showtime's Desus and Morrow were also being paid full rates with transparent communication. So these hosts and these companies' talk shows, they are actually taking care of their workers. So it's not as if they can't. It's not as if this is an impossible ask. But apparently Ellen is not going to. She is not going to do this. Why? It's because she's trash. She is bourgeois liberal garbage. She is the classic limousine liberal. Just because she's a successful gay icon and an inspiration to many LGBTQ people doesn't mean that she's a good person overall. There's more to people than just her identity, of course. And one of those things is how you treat the people around you and how you treat your workers. And from some of the stories I've heard, and I'm sure not all of them are true, but many of them are or might be, that she treats staff and people around her like they don't exist or like she is better than them. For example, I've read accounts, and I'm not entirely sure. You should take these with a grain of salt. But there are many who have said, hey, man, look, she won't even let you look her in the eyes. That sounds a lot like what Steve Harvey had been doing as well. Steve Harvey, don't look at me. Interns, you're not allowed to look at me. How dare you look me in the eyes? Don't you know who I am? Of course you know who I am. Then why the hell are you looking at me? I'm so much better than you. That's that kind of absolute elitist attitude. Absolutely elitist. And you know, when it comes to people that make your show possible, you know, who you wouldn't be here without their hard work, maybe you should actually take care of them, especially when the circumstances aren't their fault. This is about fairness. It's about humanity. And unfortunately, so many of our celebrities and politicians, because we have this culture, right, that says, oh no, if you're wealthy, you're better than everyone else. And you should act like it because those little people aren't worth a goddamn, right? We shouldn't care about those people at all because you are the best. You are the greatest. Look at how wealthy and successful you are. You're on television. But if you're not on TV, you're garbage. You're trash. You're lower than the low. You are the scum on my boot. That's how these people act. We need to remind them that, you know what? We're the ones who make you successful. We're the ones, not you. Because none of these celebrities would be anything without the workers and wouldn't be anything without the viewers. And maybe they need to stop focusing on their own wealth and their own power. I think when all this is over, us regular people, we need to remember who is on our side, the side of fairness and humanity, and who hid in their guild and mansions, taking only care of only themselves and their own wealth. All right. By the way, I hear Portia's super nice, though. Yeah. Got nothing against Portia. All right. Moving on. It has started. What we have feared would happen. With Joe Biden now the presumptive Democratic nominee, the Trump campaign is already undermining Joe Biden by simply showing Biden losing focus and not being able to put together a coherent sentence. Videos like this.
You know, there's during World War II, where Roosevelt came up with a thing that was totally different than he called it the World War II. He had the War Production Board.
Yeah. Sanjay Gupta's face, man. You could see the pained expression. At that moment, we were all Sanjay Gupta. Except, of course, for Trump supporters who were absolutely gleeful that they get to run against this guy and not Bernie Sanders, who Donald Trump was actually very apprehensive about running against. In fact, in leaked audio that I've shown you guys here on the show before, had you listened to, Trump was like, I don't want to go against Bernie Sanders. No, much easier to go against somebody like Hillary Clinton or another establishment figure. So now the person sharing this video was originally was Donald Trump's deputy director of communications, Zach Parkinson. And then it was shared by Trump War Room, which has actually a much bigger following on social media. And so this video is out there. And by the way, they didn't even have to add anything. All they did was just quote him. And that's it. Now, the reason that I'm doing this story is not because, Biden, and oh my God, the Trump guys are right. No, what I'm saying is that this is going to be their attack against Biden. And they're going to show these videos, and they already are, to show that he is mentally unfit to run the country. Now, I think Donald Trump's mentally unfit for many, many reasons, right? But I'm not the people that these guys are going to convince. Think about the independent swing voters who are already not enthused about going back to the Obama years with Joe Biden, or the uninformed voters who see Biden tripping over his own words and not making any sort of sense. I'm saying that this could be an effective strategy. Whether or not it overshadows Donald Trump's terrible response to coronavirus or the Trump fatigue that many people in the country do have, I've got no idea, but this is what they're going with. This is what they're going with. So I don't know what's going to happen. Now, the Democrats, they do need to pick an exciting VP. Somebody you know could take over if Biden were to be incapacitated if he wins the election, and maybe to pick up the progressive voter. So there's a couple of different names that are being floated around, ones that Biden will probably not consider. One of them is Tammy Baldwin. Another one, Nina Turner. And then there's Barbara Lee. These are more exciting progressive women. And look, I would be okay with some of these picks. I doubt that it's going to happen. If we're probably going to see a Gretchen Whitmer or a Amy Klobuchar. Seriously. Gretchen Whitmer, hey, oh, look, Michigan, right? No, those two ladies are the Tim Kaine of this election cycle, which means, without a doubt, one of them is going to end up being VP. Seriously. It's terrible. Terrible. What are they doing? But look, it's also possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but it is possible that they end up replacing Joe Biden with someone else. And whose name would that be? Andrew Cuomo. I'm not saying that is likely to happen. I am saying it's definitely possible that it could happen. And if it does, it would be pure madness. Because that's 100% undemocratic. You remove him, he's just not feeling well, or he's got coronavirus and he needs to sit out, or, it's Joe Biden. I mean, he did his best, but he's not up to it. I guess we're going to have to replace him with Andrew Cuomo or Michael Bloomberg. That would be, again, madness. Madness. This would completely nullify a primary and cause absolute chaos. But if that doesn't happen, by the way, look, I think the Democrats, they couldn't have picked a worse candidate to go up against Donald Trump. And that's just on mental preparedness alone. Now, look, I'm not saying that's Biden all the time, and I'm not saying that, he's got 100% verifiable cognitive decline. What I do say is that there are instances where he is not as sharp as he used to be, and that he is getting a bit older. He's around the same age. I believe he's either a year younger than Bernie Sanders or a year older, 78 years old. And he's sometimes not sharp. Now, sometimes he is. But other times, like that, definitely something seems to be going on here. And that's not to mention, by the way, other problems with Joe Biden, his terrible record, his history of lying. That's not a result of any sort of mental decline. No, he literally lied about being arrested in South Africa during apartheid, which he was not. And so, I mean, you have all the terrible votes as well. For example, to confirm Scalia, right? Anita Hill. You've got all of this stuff. And the sexual harassment allegations, or I'm sorry, sexual assault allegations from Tara Reid. And the numerous videos of Biden being super creepy around women. I mean, this may be worse than 2016. Worse. As if we didn't already have what we thought was one of the worst candidates. But now, I'm coming around to thinking that maybe a majority of the hatred towards Hillary Clinton, and this is not, leftward hatred towards Hillary Clinton, but a lot of the hatred towards Hillary Clinton mainly had to do with the fact that she was a woman. Whereas Joe Biden has actually taken worse positions than Hillary Clinton has. And yet there are people that like him more because he's a dude and because he's got that, oh, shucks, regular guy looking, vibe to him. When in reality, again, he's the senator from MBNA. That was his nickname because he represented the credit card companies. And Elizabeth Warren got famous for calling him out for it. Yeah, so there is sexism. Absolutely. And it's amazing that nobody in the establishment can admit the problems with Joe Biden. And the fact that he's going to get absolutely destroyed in debates unless they can do what they did when he was in the last debate with Bernie Sanders, where he tended to actually keep it together. So I don't know if they can repeat that trick twice, 3 times, 4 times, whatever. But Donald Trump, you get him in a debate with Joe Biden, he's going to rip Biden apart. And here we're going to say, we told you so. All right. Great news. Yay. Awesome. All right. Anyway, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take a break. We'll come back. We've got the AOC story. Very, very nuanced discussion here about AOC and her interview with the New York Times. I think it's fascinating, so we'll get into that. And then we've got Bernie Sanders on Tara Reid. Interesting. So we'll do that stuff. We'll be right back right after this break. Around the Nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. We'll start up with some super chats. Sarchek says only 1% of the country has been tested. We need massive testing before the lockdown is rescinded. Testing, and more testing. We also actually need to have a national strategy where we first, again, do aggressive testing. That's a major, major part of it. And then start to ease the lockdowns when you have successfully flattened that curve, right? When we have shown, at least for a good couple of week portion, that we have less new infections when they really start to come down. So, and right now we're not in that situation. We're not even close. David Richardson, who's in another part of the world, in New Zealand, says that they're considering lifting a few lockdown restrictions next week, but they're hesitant. They're looking to test with higher education, or at least what couldn't be done online. So there are some countries, like Germany, our resident German viewer has pointed out that they're starting to do a little bit of easing of some of the lockdowns. And that's because a lot of these other countries have done far more aggressive testing than the United States. The United States has not. So we're nowhere near it. And without that aggressive testing to make sure that these places, and not only that, but contact tracing, et cetera, to make sure to see who's been infected or who could be spreading around infections to other people, without knowing how many are truly infected, and then making the people who are infected quarantine at home, we're not going to get a handle on this in the United States. We're nowhere near lockdown, ending the lockdown. And so we're not at the end of this. We're not even close. I'd say we're not even halfway now. It's just, I mean, it's ridiculous that Trump's like, we got to reopen the country. Nobody knows about reopening the country more than Donald Trump. Oh my God, you're going to kill us. What are you doing? What are you doing? It's all about, of course, unfortunately, enriching himself and his friends at the expense of the rest of us. Because again, notice that the same people that are telling us, oh, get back in the economy, they're the ones that don't actually have to get back in the economy. It's ridiculous. All right. One more here. Glassword says, but Jeff, he's electable for stuff and polls. You know that in I think I did the story a couple of days ago where Joe Biden is not polling very well in swing states. National polls has got a pretty decent lead, right? But in the states that determine the outcome of the Electoral College, he is really struggling. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Here we go again. Yikes. All right. So let's go into the next story here. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not thrilled about the recent attempts of the Biden campaign to reach out to progressives. She's not exactly happy with his outreach so far, according to a recent phone interview with the New York Times. She actually said that Biden's current overtures to progressives must go further if she was to offer her endorsement. So now, endorsement and support are not the same thing. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said, yeah, of course I'll support the nominee, right? That happens to be Joe Biden at this point, presumptive nominee. But she says, my endorsement, however, well, that's different. You actually got to earn my endorsement. That's much different than Bernie Sanders and actually a much better position than Bernie Sanders. So now the New York Times interviewer had asked her, okay, well, what type of outreach are you looking for? And she said this, after noting that unity is a process and a very long, painful one, and one that will involve actual discussion on policy and not sweeping those policy discussions under the rug and pretending that our disagreements are stylistic, which unfortunately seems to be what the Biden campaign is doing, putting out graphics like, oh, Bernie and Joe, they're not so different. Look at the same policy. They have similar policies. No, they don't. Medicare for All is not the same as a public option. They're two different, completely different systems. Expanding the ACA, far different than expanding Medicare to everyone. So those are completely different. Joe Biden's stance on the environment, for example. Bernie Sanders, Green New Deal. Joe Biden, something vague about a framework of Green New Deal, but not really, but just getting back into the Paris Climate Agreement. So there are huge policy differences that you can't just paper over and say, well, look, the only differences they had were just really stylistic, and Bernie Sanders' style was a bit more rough and acerbic, and than Joe Biden is more civility. No, wrong, 100%. And so that's what AOC is pointing out, right? No, these disagreements are not stylistic. We have significant differences. And so she says this: I don't think this conversation about changes that need to be made is one about throwing the progressive wing of the party a couple of bones. I think this is about how we can win. And she goes on to further say that the whole process of coming together should be uncomfortable for everyone involved. Quote, that's how you know it's working. And if Biden is only doing things he's comfortable with, then it's not enough. So let me tell you right now, from my position, any conversation that involves unity with Biden is already super uncomfortable enough. Okay? It's really a big ask to ask people who are not, for one, many people who are not normally Democrats to begin with and have endured years of being told that we are the problem, that we're worse than Donald Trump. Look, all that stuff, I don't really care about. People call me worse every day, right? I don't really care if you want to call me a Trump supporter, whatever, you know the truth. I want to defeat Trump more than anybody. That's why I voted for Bernie Sanders. And that's why, of course, I rail against him every single day on every single show. That said, right, we've been told that our policy positions are just impossible. Oh, we can't have that. Better things, not possible. We've got to go back to the status quo. And if you dare say that the status quo is not good enough, well, then you're being toxic and you're going to give the election to Donald Trump. Get out of here. Get out of here. No, people in the Democratic Party, I've noticed, partisans, right? They're just as right-wing as Republicans are when they talk about how, oh, we don't want socialism here. We're going to defeat socialism in the Democratic Party. You realize Medicare socialism, Social Security is a literal socialist program. So all of that. My point being, we're uncomfortable getting together with right-wingers who are less right-wing than the Republican Party. And of course, you look at the people who have defected from the Republican Party to go and join the Democrats, people like Jennifer Rubin. You want me to, you want us to unite with that? You called us, you're not Democrats anyway. Well, then what the hell is Jennifer Rubin? She ain't a Democrat. No, she's a Republican. Just not as openly toxic as most other Republicans. So it's ridiculous, right? But anyway, so here's the thing. You need our votes. You can deny it all you want, but you need the youth vote. Why? Because every election where a president on the Democratic side does not get the youth vote, they lose. John Kerry in 2004, right? You have Hillary Clinton in 2016. You lose when you don't have the youth vote. Obama won with the youth vote. Clinton won with the youth vote. You've got to have people in the party, the young people, turn out to vote. So you know what? You need us. And yes, we need you as well. But we need you to come our way on policy. And that's it, policy. That's all we care about. Call us whatever name you want. Policy, policy, policy. And so now, how much discomfort are you willing to go through as a party if you're on the Biden side? That's a good question, and that's a fair question. And so now the interviewer asks her, can you give me some examples of areas you want to see Biden get uncomfortable? And here's her answer, quote, they floated this olive branch to the progressive left of lowering the Medicare age to 60. And it's almost insulting. Not almost. It's definitely insulting. Oh, you want to get young people. So you're like, I know, here's a good idea. We'll lower the Medicare enrollment age from 65 to 60. What? Oh, no, yeah, that's going to get us, 25 to 30, 39-year-olds. You're going to get that Democrat. No. Here's the thing. Hillary Clinton was actually more progressive on this issue. She would have lowered it to 50. Yeah. So we're talking about a progressive concession, getting back to her quote here, that is 10 years worse than the nominee had in 2016. Ridiculous. Biden is less progressive than Hillary Clinton. And that's a slap in the face, especially now, because in 2016, we did not have a global pandemic. And we didn't have the levels of support for Medicare for all that we do today. In fact, you look at all the exit polling, clearly large majorities of Democratic voters in the states that had the primaries preferred a Medicare for all single-payer system. And now you have a global pandemic that has cost 22 million jobs so far, and you have millions of people that have lost their private insurance. That is one way, going towards Medicare for all, that would be a major concession to the left. Yes, I now believe in Medicare for all. You're right. Bernie Sanders was right about this. I have evolved on the position. Say whatever the hell you want to say, right? You can even call it Biden care for all. I give a damn about, right? But just come over to that policy position. But he's not going to because of the donors. And that's the problem here. The donors. Joe Biden and the Democratic establishment are funded by health insurance corporations. That's why he's not going to evolve on that. Now, some other things that AOC talked about, of course, is immigration reform, doing better than what they did back during the Obama administration, where Obama was considered the deporter in chief. He deported more people than Trump. And so, yes, no, he didn't put people in cages, but he instead sent them back to their own countries. Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Now, AOC says we actually need to change that, not only in terms of deportations, but apprehensions and also rhetoric. And then adds, what people need is to feel hope in a Democratic administration. And that's what this is about. If we're not talking about paths to citizenship for undocumented people, and if we're just talking about policy changes of 5 to 10%, especially when you look at something like climate change, it's not about moving the left or to the left. It's about who is able to find hope in your administration and creating plans to give people hope and possibility. And that's very, very true. So now, look, she's basically saying Biden needs to be more progressive if he's going to win. And, also says that he didn't exactly win the nomination based on his policy positions. He won the nomination based on a different set of factors. Because you remember before Super Tuesday, before South Carolina, Biden was struggling. A lot of us said, this guy's going to drop out soon. He's got no chance of making it past Super Tuesday. Then the Clyburn endorsement, which was incredibly powerful in South Carolina. He got a South Carolina win. Bloody Monday. You had all the centrists drop out, coalesce. You had the media that talked about that constantly. And that changed the entire race. Where it was an 8-person race, it became a 2-person race. And of course, with that establishment vote coalesce behind Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders didn't stand a chance. And so she said he didn't win it on his own, so maybe he needs to come to our side when it comes to policy. And by our side, I mean the voters' side. As many Democratic voters, a majority of, agree with Bernie Sanders on the policies. And so the other thing that she mentions is also that a lot of these voters are not going to be swayed by, let's go back to normal. Let's go back to what we had before. And a lot of voters a lot of non-voters we've seen are not, going to be involved in the political system because they see the message of let's go back to normal, let's go back to what it was before, and think, well, before it sucked too. So really, what's the difference here? Why should we support that? Why should we vote for that? Yeah, because Trump is worse? Yeah, he is objectively worse, of course. But that's not really an inspiring message. Especially since we know that, again, that a lot of the non-voters that you want to swing to your side are primarily disadvantaged already. These are not white, wealthy people that are abstaining from voting. No, in reality, it's the opposite. White wealthy people make up the majority of voters. And so you want to get the people that, that are disadvantaged, the ones who will be helped the most by progressive policy. You've got to get them out to vote. You have to get them out to vote. You got to reach out to those people. And so she makes that argument as well. She said, beating Donald Trump is a matter of life or death for our communities. I think it's a difference between making an argument for harm reduction and is making the argument for there's actually going to be progress made for us. What I want to do is to be able to go out and say, this is the plan for us, but it's hard to do if there's no plan for us. And they ask, of course, who is us? And she says, any number of communities, whether it's the Bronx, whether it's Latinos, or whether it's people of color, women, young people, whether it's people with student debt, whether it's working class people or people with no health care. And, I'm not trying to be divisive. So we're talking about a progressive concession. I'm sorry. I'm getting lost here. But she says, I'm not going to lie to people and say that Puerto Rico's debt is going to be forgiven or there's going to be some audit of the debt if that's not the plan. But at the same time, I don't want this president throwing paper towels at my family again. I just want to tell the truth, and I want to feel good about the truth. And that's it. I mean, again, she makes a good point. And I think we're all facing a situation that we never wanted to face in the first place. Being stuck with Joe Biden as our nominee. That was the worst case scenario. And now a lot of us are trying to push Biden's team with what little power we actually have. For me, it's my vote. My vote is the only amount of power that I have. I don't look, you might look at my channel and think, well, you have a decent platform, right? Not compared to cable news. I don't reach as many people as I'd love to. And so what little power I have is my vote. And so, for her, it is her platform and it's her endorsement. And so she's trying to leverage that for Joe Biden and saying, look, if you want that endorsement, which is powerful, then you're going to have to come to our side. And then you're going to have to start putting forward some good policy positions that will get people excited. Because I could endorse all day. Bernie Sanders can endorse. That's not going to bring people over. Because, on the progressive left, it's never been about celebrity. It's always been about one thing. It's been about policy positions. And so if you don't have good policy, then all the endorsements in the world aren't going to mean a damn thing. And so the thing is, she's going to get criticized from both sides. She already is, of course. But what she's doing is she's saying, I'm going to leverage my endorsement to push policies that mitigate the most harm and that give us a little bit of progress. Now, I understand what she's doing, understand what she's saying, right? And I hope she's got some ability to break through. But as far as I'm concerned, again, since my vote is the only power that I have, I'm going to leverage it for the same thing and say that I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden unless he starts to make significant strides towards a progressive agenda. And y'all may get mad at me for it. And I'm certainly not telling you what to do. And I'm certainly not going to vote shame you either way, right? You can think, well, I'm sorry, but I need to mitigate as much harm as possible. So I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. That's fine. That your vote is up for you. But what I'm doing is I'm going to leverage what little power I have in my vote and use it to try to get something more positive and more progressive because this country desperately needs it. And even though I know that, we may not survive another 4 years of Trump, for me personally, it's just one thing that I'm willing to put on the line. The question for you should always be, what am I willing to put on the line? And what am I willing to do with my vote? All right. one more story here. Senator Bernie Sanders has finally responded to the sexual assault allegation against former Vice President Joe Biden. So now this is the allegation brought by Tara Reid. We've talked about her on the show. She was a former assistant to Joe Biden when he was in the Senate, and she accused Biden of sexual assault at that time back in 1993. So now Biden himself has not commented on these allegations. His campaign has denied them. And mainstream media, until Bernie Sanders dropped out, was not reporting on those. Now, there was a great breakdown in The Intercept. I believe they even broke this story. And you also had independent media figures like Katie Halper actually giving Tara Reid a platform in order to tell her own story. But at the same time, corporate media was not touching it. They weren't interested. And neither were many important political figures. For example, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had not addressed those, to significant pushback. And now, of course, Bernie Sanders has finally responded to this. He said, this is on CBS this morning, quote, "I think it's relevant to talk about anything. And I think every woman who feels she has been assaulted has every right in the world to stand up and make her claims. The public will make their own conclusions about it. I just don't know enough about it to comment further." So, look, that's Bernie Sanders addressing it. I actually think that was super weak. I love Bernie Sanders, but seriously, that is not a good answer. That could have been much more aggressive, but I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to say, well, I mean, like it's legitimate. We can talk about these things, but I don't really know a whole lot about it. And maybe he doesn't, right? Maybe it's like, dude, I was too busy campaigning. All right, look, if that's up to you whether you think that's a good answer or not. I don't believe it is. I think he could have been much stronger, much more aggressive on this, but there's a lot of instances where I also feel that Bernie Sanders could have been stronger and more aggressive against Joe Biden. But you also have to understand that he does consider, strangely enough, Joe Biden to be a friend. And so maybe he's kind of hedging a bit. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's answer a little bit better. She said, quote, "I think it's legitimate to talk about these things. And if we again want to have integrity, you can't say, both believe women support all of this until it inconveniences you, until it inconveniences us. A lot of us survivors, and it's really, really hard and uncomfortable. Not discussing allegations is the exact opposite of integrity. It is not okay to prioritize beating Trump over discussing sensitive Me Too issues like these because they are very legitimate things." All right, so look, that is a much stronger response. I like her response. I think Bernie Sanders has said something very, very weak and very milquetoast, and that's depressing. But AOC, much, much stronger. And look, here's the thing. You might have noticed, and I certainly have, that a lot of people who supported Christine Blasey Ford and her allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, they have scrubbed those tweets. Not only that, but a lot of them have taken Me Too out of their bios. I think that's more significant, right? People like Alyssa Milano also taking Me Too out of their bios and erasing the supposed work that they've done. And I think that's indicative of who they are. Unfortunately, people weaponizing Me Too to go after their political opponents, that's what this, especially Milano. She definitely used it. Now, look, I believe Christine Blasey Ford because I listened to her testimony and it was credible. I also listened to Tara Reid's testimony and that was credible as well. But what's the difference? Well, Kavanaugh was a Republican. And yet, Joe Biden, well, he's considered a Democrat. And so we can't listen to that at all. So it's Me Too unless it's blue. And that's what that is. And so they're going to ignore it, except interestingly enough, Al Franken. Now, Al Franken, I remember when that happened, right? So the thing that people talk about Al Franken, what they're missing, right, is that remember his accuser, unlike the situation with Biden, didn't come from the left, came from the right wing, came from conservatives. Tara, she supported Elizabeth Warren and then Bernie Sanders in the primary. I think that's because establishment liberals are more deferential to the right wing. If something comes in from the right wing, oh my God, ooh, no, we got to take that seriously. And we got to jettison that person immediately. Me too, right? Oh, but no, that it came from that pesky progressive left wing. No, we can't have that. That's just a way to destroy Joe Biden. So, I mean, look, I think that's one reason Tara Reade's allegations were immediately dismissed. The other, of course, is this desire to get rid of Trump, which I totally understand. But if you really wanted to get rid of Trump, well, you couldn't have picked the worst person to try to challenge him. Now, I see a lot of people, by the way, who are rightly so alienated. A lot of women, sexual assault survivors, who are saying, I can't vote for an alleged rapist. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then I also see a lot of people who shame those individuals, those women, because they're not able to vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, who has even more sexual assault and rape allegations against him. So now that goes into AOC's statement, right? She says, a lot of people are just like us in this moment where it's like, how did we get here? You know, it almost felt like we started the cycle where we had kind of moved on from, from all of this. And now it feels like we're kind of back in it. And, the most diverse field that we've ever had, that we're kind of back into replaying old movies in a way. Yeah. And so to kind of answer her question, we're here because the establishment did everything they could to derail the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. They were afraid of him. The media especially, whom Bernie does, rightly so, saddles some of the blame on for good reason. That same media is the media that ignored Tara Reade up until recently and are now putting out pieces like, ooh, Tara Reade, what are we going to do about that? Very, very uncomfortable conversation. Oh, no, it's uncomfortable because it's Joe Biden, but it wasn't uncomfortable when it was Brett Kavanaugh. When it's literally almost the same thing. I mean, come on. Now, that gets me to the question, of course, is whether it's too late. Will Tara ever be taken seriously? I don't know. Or will she be used, if Biden loses to Donald Trump, as a scapegoat? And then everyone who spoke about her allegations will also be used as a scapegoat to blame Biden's loss on. I could see it happening. I'm pretty sure you could too. I just wish that Bernie Sanders and the media had spoken about this earlier, before we got to this point of no return, where there's no other option now. Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee. Why didn't Bernie Sanders speak about it earlier when it came up? And again, I understand that maybe he was too busy campaigning. He didn't want to go into what he would consider to be nasty personal attacks, because that's not who Bernie Sanders is. If you wanted somebody who was willing to go into the mud, Bernie Sanders is not that guy. No, Bernie Sanders is nice. He's too nice, and a lot for his own good. People will use nasty, disgusting smears against him, and he will not fight back using those. No, he'll fight back being, and this is simultaneously why we love Bernie Sanders and why we're so frustrated with him, is because he doesn't fight back dirty. He's too, I guess, pure, too good of a guy, right? In order to do that. And again, that's the most frustrating thing, because politics is a dirty, dirty, disgusting game. And so I guess if you're not going to go in the mud, there's a good chance that you're not going to win. And so I just wish he would have talked about it, at least addressed it in whatever way. Hey, this is concerning. Maybe we should, hear Tara out what's going on, with this situation. Then at least that might have been enough to get the media talking. Although, of course, almost, assuredly the media would be like, I can't believe Bernie Sanders would bring that up. there's no winning on this situation. But beyond the ridiculous politics of it, there's also no winning for Tara. I've seen, countless smear articles against her because she once said nice things about Vladimir Putin. Oh, that's it. Putin puppet, right? Just trying to destroy. Well, okay. Well, now that Bernie Sanders is out of the race, now what? Is she still a Putin puppet? Oh, yes, because she must be working for Donald Trump. So that's the narrative here. And so all I'm concerned about here is justice, and it appears that Tara is not going to have any sort of justice. And that's, I think, the saddest legacy of Me Too that you could ever have. All right. All right. Man. A lot of comments from you guys. Yeah. I'm just reading some of these. All right. So look, thank you guys for tuning in, for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. If you haven't already, please subscribe if you're not a subscriber. I'm not sure why you would be, why you wouldn't be. Also, please help us get to 400 patrons. It's patreon.com/DYDNation. Literally, the show is in your hands. You can, help insulate us and protect us from going under during this COVID-19 crisis. So if you enjoy what I do, if you have a couple of bucks to spare, patreon.com/DYDNation. Ensure that, progressive media continues and survives the crisis. All right, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you here on Monday. Stay safe. Stay home. Wash your hands. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you on Monday.
Please clap.
Mike Pounds.
Wait, you're getting nervous, man.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.